commercial integrator ran a story a number of years ago, and it's probably been 10 years almost now. And Wrigley went through a big rehab. They put in new speakers and new video wall. They had some very heated discussions between the mayor's office and the folks that own Wrigley, between how loud it could be, how late at night they could run those speakers, and how bright that direct view LED wall could be.
Yeah, they don't want to hear a 35K barcode going.
I mean, I do, but
I kind of like the Wrigley Field bit.
Yeah, real cute.
It's too loud at the Real Madrid Stadium. Huddly cuts their prices and managing the power in your AV spaces. All that and more next on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 668, recorded Friday, June 7th, 2024. The power of data. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. These are the biggest stories we could find this week, and with us to talk about those stories, first and foremost, my buddy Bren Walker from Kierkegaard. Welcome, ma'am.
Hey, Tim, how are you?
I am doing well. And a young man I have known probably as long as I've been in the AV industry. His name is Scott Tyner, and he is with Bates College. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Bren. Thanks for having me.
Hey,
absolutely. Funny story about Tyner. So when we started AVNation, EdTech was the second show we did, right? AV Week is technically the longest one we did. But Tyner was kind enough to join me and a couple other dear friends who were all on the Technology Managers Council at the time, because I was a tech manager back then. So Mr. Tyner and I go a little ways back. So
way back.
All right. We are recording this the Friday before a bunch of us jump on a plane and go to Vegas. Where I've heard it's going to be seasonably chilly, and I should wear an Arctic coat. Tongue is in my cheek. It's 105 next week. So, a couple of these things we'll touch on. InfoComm we'll talk about at the end. Come by the tweet up. It's 4 to 6 on Wednesday. We'll talk about that as well. First story though comes to us from AV Magazine. Middle Atlantic has announced the launch of a Crestron-certified module for their NEXSYS series UPS backup power system. This integration aims to streamline the installation and management process for AV integrators and end users by providing enhanced control and management capabilities through Crestron control systems. Now, here's personal cool thing, AVNation cool thing. Module was developed by our friends over at Control Concepts and Steve Greenblatt. It has been certified by Crestron, and it enables native control of NEXSYS UPSs, offering improved support for intelligent system control, logging, data management, and environmental control features. Tyner, I am starting with you on this simply because you are the very first person I had ever met in my AV career who was actively monitoring your systems at Bates and creating reports coming out of us. Now, this goes back 10 years, dude, where, and I'm going to let you tell the rest of the story, but the thing that really caught me was at the time, right, those of us that were in higher education, we were having debates with faculty on whether or not to get rid of VCR players. I'm not kidding you. And DVD players. That's how long ago this was.
Wow.
So Tyner, how important is that still today, that monitoring, that management, but also those reports that you're still able to produce?
I think it's as important today as it was, and maybe even 15 years ago, Tim, might have been when we started doing that. We've used reports as recently as this past fall. We had a discussion on campus as to whether we still needed podium computers in classrooms. And do you bring, or every faculty member now has a laptop, do they bring their laptop in? And so we pulled these reports to say, what's the percentage of people that walk in and use the podium machine versus what's the percentage that walk in and bring in their laptop? Now, that doesn't answer the full question, but when you know that 80% of the people come in and they're used to using that podium machine and only 20% are bringing their laptop, you do realize making a switch is affecting a significant number of your end users. Yeah. Not to bury the lead, we didn't end up doing it because we realized it would be too much. But we still monitor and report on all kinds of things, room usages, how often people are recording things in rooms, how often the projectors are on, just all kinds of stuff we still look at and report on. And certainly we do reports on any kind of help calls or trouble calls that we get.
Yep.
As you can imagine, having done this for a while, I'm a firm believer in that old philosophy of if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Mm-hmm. This is something that our clients have to be able to do it now, right? Especially if they have any measure of government funding in their mix. It's worth money to them to actually be able to talk about how they are managing their power consumption, how they are using tools available to them to minimize power consumption. And as we increasingly get into the software driven world and in our world, software is greedy and it wants power. And our ability to manage how much power you're going to use in any given situation is going to that importance of that is going to increase as AI is used more in AV devices.
All right, Scott, here because Brent hit something here, and this struck me because, again, used to be a tech manager here 100 years ago, and I was involved in a number of buildings that we were striving for LEED certification. And LEED it never took off like it was advertised as. It's still there. And Brent, you can correct me here if I'm wrong because you're more on the consulting side and you see this, but it feels very much like it did not take off like it was advertised, right?
It's assumed.
It's assumed now. Okay, so it is bigger than okay. So I am 100% wrong on that. So at the time, though, one of the areas was power consumption and power management. Scott, power management is not incredibly attractive. It is not shiny. It does not have lumens. It is not a DB LED wall. How do you get the powers that be to care about power management?
Two different ways. One is if you have a community like we have at my institution, it's a commitment the institution has made to helping the planet, conserving electricity, being carbon neutral. And so, and we're fortunate in our case that it is shiny. It is something. The other thing we've done, and if it's not in your culture, here's what you do. You actually do the math and show somebody how much money they're saving if they shut off 100 amplifiers every night that aren't just sitting there running for 12 hours doing absolutely nothing. And I was surprised when I actually sat down and started doing that math. It adds up. You're saving some significant money, and then people do start paying attention to it.
Brandon, same kind of question. Only instead of being internal, you're a consultant, so you're a little bit external. How do you how do you have that conversation with your clients?
It's the same thing as the dollar bill, right? It's how can you show a marked difference for choosing one course of behavior versus another? So if you decide, okay, yes, we're going to, and I think this is the case with all of the things that sort of fall into like social issues that are also business issues, right? The social issue of what's happening with our environment and whatever position you want to take about it, right? There are benefits to be gained if you are conscious about it, right? And it's really just saying, okay, well, here's the benefit. Quantitatively, I can tell you what that benefit's going to be. And at this point, we're not actually having to, at least in my world, we're not having to actually sell people on it. I now have university architects asking me about it before I've even submitted my first, concept document. So they are there. And the other clients are going to get there too, as they see that there's financial opportunity for doing it.
We actually had our biggest struggle was actually with the IT department because they wanted our computer labs on all the time so they can update the computers. And boy, and we're a small school, right? But if you talk about 600 computers and monitors that you're leaving on 24/7, 365, and you start doing the math on that. And so we make an agreement. Great. Let's turn them on automatically at 4 a.m. and they can update for 2 hours before anybody shows up. You don't have to leave them on for 12 hours when there's just nobody around, or all summer when there's nobody around. So that was actually a little more difficult than the AV team, because the AV team just kind of realized this and believed in it early on and it was doing it on their own.
All right. Next story is come to us from our friends over at Rave. In a move aimed to capture the attention of facility managers and meeting space planners in the education sector, Huddly has announced new list prices for its product line. The updated pricing structure caters to various room sizes and applications, offering solutions for small huddle rooms to large multi-camera setups. Some examples is like the Huddly Crew AI-directed multi-camera system. That's at $94.50. It goes all the way down to a list price or MSRP price of $330 MSRP. Bren, cameras is a really, really saturated market. It really is. What is the most effective strategy to attract clients, to get them buy-in, and quite frankly, to get them to at least try out what could be a new solution to them, or maybe a solution they haven't given much thought to?
What would be the best strategy? I mean, that's a tough one because it's a race to the bottom, right?
Yeah.
So it just like, as we talk about so often in terms of the shift of codec from hardware to soft,
Yep.
Now the difference maker is, well, what does your software do, right? And I think what's going to come with that is this desire to have software as a service related to some of these things isn't going to fly, right? That there's going to be someone who's going to say, okay, I'm not going to try to hit you up every month for $40 to make sure that these cameras still do what we said they would do. So it's tough. It's really, really tough. Like I mean, I'm happy when I see those prices, especially for the smaller rooms, because it makes it really easy for someone to bite off on it, right? But for the manufacturers, how sustainable is it? I don't know. You have to have the best people developing the software side of it. I guess that's the thing. How well do you compete on that side? And AI is going to change all that too, dude. Because it's like people are writing things now, like, Seer Vision is when there's an open source version of that. What happens? Like, and it's not that far away. It's pretty close, actually. So I'm not sure I helped.
No, you did, because here's the thing. You said something there that Scott and I were kind of chatting earlier before we started rolling, and that is the increased monthly cost to organizations. And this is not exactly the road I anticipated going down with this story, but it's still valid. Scott, yeah, the cameras are cheap, and they can get in that way as well. But as somebody who has to manage those operational costs versus the capital expenses, right? How big of a deal is this subscription economy? I guess you can call it as a service if you want, but it's all subscription, right? AVNation is an Adobe house. I've made no bones about that for 10 years. And back when we started, we bought an entire package, and I paid X amount, probably $1,000 if I have to guess off the top of my head. Every couple of years we wanted to update it. And now that has shifted to, we pay a monthly fee for the number of users that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I am not great at math, but I'm telling you that we're spending more than we spent 10 years ago. So
Yes,
how
you
big
are.
of an issue is that becoming, Scott, on campuses and in corporations?
It's a huge problem. I was saying to Tim before we started rolling, I actually believe that software and software costs, or these monthly subscription costs, are probably one of the biggest threats to higher ed. They're unsustainable, and everybody is going with that model because it's so financially rewarding for them that why wouldn't they? And there's a benefit to us. I mean, like you said with Adobe, right? You get updates all the time, and you've got the newest
Absolutely.
product all the time. It's great. But like you said, you're also paying 10 times, 15 times what you used to pay for it. And you're stuck in it. You can't get out of it. And you have no control over what the increases are going to be. Yeah. It's an enormous threat. And I don't know how how we get out of it, and maybe if we go back to kind of marketing, maybe that's a place somewhere that somebody's going to figure out that gets us away from the race to the bottom, which I fully agree with Brad. That's all this is with cameras. My advice is to get out of the camera business. I mean, what are you doing? But maybe somebody needs to realize I'm actually going to sell stuff the way we used to sell it.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm going to, that'll be my spot in the market.
Well, it's interesting. This thought about how much wealth generation is going to come from AI. And, I was just talking with somebody who was saying that it is estimated to be $14 quadrillion over the next 20 years.
How much is a quadrillion?
Take a quadrillion is, what do? We take a trillion and multiply it by 1,000.
So it's it's the next step beyond
It's
trillion.
the next step above a trillion.
Thank you.
Right? And 8 of that is going to be with 5 companies.
Oy.
Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta. How many of those companies are making their money off of a hard thing?
One?
The one at the top. Apple, the one at the top. They have the perfect storm of getting you to buy a hard thing that you think is unique and different from everybody else's hard thing. They give it to you before it's ready to be in the market, so you test it for them all the time to make sure that so it gets better. Then you're in their ecosystem, so you can't leave because all your songs just disappeared or whatever, right? So this idea that everybody's going to be able to get a piece of the, monthly nut pie is just not sustainable. It's not sustainable for end users like Scott, and it's also not sustainable for industry.
No.
Now, I understand why it's attractive. If you are, if you're private equity funded, they look at that and say, okay, you got X amount of dollars happening in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the break is gonna come. It's gonna come. The dam's gonna break on that, I think. But
I was just gonna say I've been listening to a different podcast recently, actually about business and the history of businesses, and it's fascinating to hear the history of Microsoft. I mean, this is them, right? They created this 40 years ago. They figured this out, and it took a lot of other companies a long time to get there, but they've been doing this for 40 years. That you don't buy anything from them. You rent it all. And you just keep every year for it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Last story comes to us from our friends at AV Magazine. When you look at the story, I 100% grabbed the story because it had Taylor Swift, or it said it was about Taylor Swift, and it's not about Taylor Swift. And I admit that publicly. I don't believe that I'm saying that even while Mitchell's recording. The mayor of Madrid has engaged with talk with Real Madrid Football Club following a series of complaints from neighbors regarding quote unquote unbearable noise emanating from concerts held at the club's Santiago Bernabeu Stadium. Stadium actually underwent renovations and has been hosting concerts since April 26 as part of a 20-year agreement with Legends and Sixth Street groups, allowing the club to utilize the space for events. Residents living in close proximity to the stadium have reported noise levels far exceeding the local limit of 53 decibels. Hang on to that number for residential areas at nighttime, with one neighbor claiming to have recorded 84.9 decibels inside their home. This is for reference, and Bren's going to correct me where all the places I'm wrong here. A jet taking off is roughly 150 dB. Down to whispering is 20 dB, roughly. The 85 dB in the house would likely be a garbage disposal is what I think it was what I read on IEC. Bren, I am going to start with you because you are in this world.
In terms of design, there have to be parameters, right? And there are achievable parameters in terms of mitigating sound past a certain line. Now, whether or not that process was followed for that stadium, it typically would be.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that they're having this issue says that either the process wasn't appropriately followed or someone did some really bad modeling. The issue, you know, I'm kind of on this thing about sound levels because of damage, right?
Yeah.
And how much damage people have suffered. And you don't suffer it. A lot of times you don't suffer it when it's happening. You know, if you go to a bunch of concerts in your 20s or 30s and you're experiencing 90 to 100 dB 3 or 4 nights a week, you will have hearing loss by the time you're 50. If you have to work in that environment, because you work the bar or whatever, you will have hearing loss, right? We know this. And our desire to have it be loud and equating loud with better is just purely a perceptual thing, you know? And if we can get past that perception, there's certain forms, obviously, thrash, metal, things like that like the loudness is the point. But if you're going to be exposed to it, I think people should be made aware of what they're being exposed to. And then they can make their free will choice.
I'll share a story here at the end, but Tyner, same kind of question here is as we, I mean, I shouldn't say as we've gotten back into the swing of things. I mean, events are happening. I picked the story because it had Taylor Swift on the title of the story, but the biggest concert to date, you know, the most bottom line profitable, or top line profitable concert to date. We're back when it comes to getting in front of a live crowd on live events. How do we, you know, balance the want and the need and the desire to get back into place with the people who just happen to live there, right? And they just happen to live around, you know, the Real Madrid Stadium, or in the case of Chicago, Wrigley Field.
I think that's a tough question, and it's funny because I think these are sometimes different situations. Because when I first started reading this, I thought, well, I mean, you happen to live by this stadium. This is kind of what you know in the area that you live. But then it kind of, in this particular situation, was like, well, they weren't doing concerts there, and then they started doing concerts there. So I think fortunately here in the United States, we might be able to say, no, there's zoning laws that you can't actually now start doing this. And just a lot of it just comes down to what we all need to get better at this point in the world is just being better humans, right? Spend some money at that stadium, as Brent said, and design it properly. And it's going to cost you some money, but to be a human. I mean, you're destroying somebody's hearing that isn't even attending this. They're sitting in their house at night.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Plant some trees, right? And plant some trees with the idea in mind that they're going to grow big, and let them grow big. Yeah. And put some buffers between the people and your stadium if you can, where you can. And plus it's good for everybody to plant some trees. So, I mean, that's depending on what the actual lot is and what the relationship is between the stadium and those properties. One way to do this is by introducing more greenery. Because it will diffuse the sound that's at least traveling at that plane. And if it's around the stadium, maybe you can send more up instead of sending more out.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
But I'm all about greenery for acoustics too. I think that we're missing a lot of opportunity by not. I want to design a conference room that if it has glass walls, I get to cover them up with a lot of plants.
I hate glass wall conference rooms. Anyhow,
and let the people come out of the meeting from breathing all that great oxygen and be happy. Yeah. And be able to hear each other. Imagine.
I mentioned Wrigley Field. Commercial Integrator ran a story a number of years ago, and it's probably been 10 years almost now. And Wrigley went through a big rehab. They put in new speakers and new video wall. And I want to say it was Rahm Emanuel was the mayor at the time. It was part of the story, and they had some very heated discussions between the mayor's office and the folks that own Wrigley between how loud it could be, how late at night they could run those speakers, and how bright that direct view LED wall could be. And again, it's a bit of a, like Scott said, being a human, but and making sure that everybody in that environment is accommodated for, because just like Real Madrid, Wrigley Field is in the middle of a freaking neighborhood, right? It is just in the, I live in St. Louis. I make no bones about the fact I live in St. Louis. Busch Stadium, which is the home of the Cardinals, is not in the middle of a neighborhood.
Right.
It just isn't.
Yeah.
It's businesses around it, right? And parking lots and hotels, but whatever. But Wrigley's in the middle of a freaking neighborhood, right? There are people putting their kids to bed at 10 o'clock at night and trying to get to bed. So,
yeah, they don't want to hear a 35K barcode going.
I mean, I do, but thank you guys so much. Bren Walker, how can people connect with you or Kierkegaard?
Bren at Kierkegaard.com. Occasionally on LinkedIn, Brenda J. Walker.
All right. Mr. Tyner, thank you, sir. How do people connect with you, Bates College, or how do they read your fantastic blogs?
So I blog monthly for Rave Pubs. You can find it there. You can find me on Twitter, S. Tyner, and then on LinkedIn as Scott Tyner.
All right, very cool. For me, for Tim Albright, do not follow me on any of the socials because I am not very interesting. But go by the website, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. We mentioned InfoComm. We're going. We're getting on a plane in about 2 or 3 days here, and braving the bitter cold of Las Vegas in June. You can go by the website, avnation.tv/InfoComm-24. Mitchell has been working his fingers already to the bone. There's a bunch of previews up there, press releases and stuff like that. And then starting Wednesday, we hit the show floor, hit the ground running, and we'll bring you booth tours and information from there. If you are going, Wednesday from 4 to 6 is the annual Tweet Up. It's a great networking event. You can find out more information about that as well on the website, avnation.tv.
Can I add that I'm teaching a session called Fear of a Bot Planet on Tuesday afternoon. And it is about, afternoon. Yeah, it's about AI and design. And then I'm in another AI forum on Thursday, I think at 11.
Thursday at 11.
And, I invite people to come by the AVIXA lounge where we have the receptions every day after the show opens. I'll be there every day.
All right. There we go. And that is in West Hall?
Dude.
I think it's the West Hall.
Today.
Double check me on that if you're listening to this and going to the show. I believe it's the West Hall.
I'm going to use Anna to tell me where to go.
Well, there you go. That's a good use. You can absolutely. She'd be good for helping you get around. So absolutely. So go see Bren if you're there at the show. And go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. That is all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.